We'll get this. We'll get it.
We're going to get there someday.
We're going to do it.
Someday this is going to be a professional place to be. our podcast is going to actually have that. Anyway, all right, let's start with that. Welcome back to All Things Acura. I'm Matt.
And I'm Justin.
And I think we can say welcome back now because
I think we can.
We're a year in, and hopefully, thank you to everyone who has been watching, leaving comments on some of our videos and everything. So it's been awesome, so we appreciate it. And I think the last video or last podcast we had, we talked about the year in review.
Yeah, we kind of wrapped up things, what happened in 22 and Acura's role in the good and bad of 22.
And I think, so obviously we were through that, so if you haven't had a chance to check that one out, that's what that one's all about. So check that one out. But on to new, bigger, and better things. So a couple really big news items that came out early this year already. And I know we kind of wanted to talk about those things that came out, and hopefully by the time we get this out, it's not old news.
Are you talking about NACTOY?
We're talking about NACTOY, which everyone knows what that is, obviously, with the acronyms in the auto industry.
Do they really say NACTOY?
No, and no one says TEGI, so, it doesn't matter. So it's 6 in 1. And then the other thing was the big race that just happened. If you're not familiar, the Rolex 24
hours at Daytona.
At Daytona, so that was a big deal. And so I think we were going to lead off with that, but we do want to talk about, which we'll tell you what NACTOY is. NACTOY is the North American car or truck, right? Of the year.
Of the year, yeah.
I think that's a T. Is that
car,
the T stands for?
Truck, utility.
But they don't have the, okay, what's the O?
I think they never changed the acronym over the years. It used to just be car and truck, and now it's
I didn't even think about that. I'm like, we have this here. Oh, it does say North American car, truck, and utility vehicle of the year. So some news regarding that, and that's kind of going to be the main part of this episode is talking about.
You're not going to tell them?
I'm not going to tell them that. No, I'm not going to say what happened.
I'm sure they already know what happened.
Everyone knows what happened. But anyway, the first thing was the race that just happened. Acura finished 1 and 2 in the Rolex 24, which is awesome.
Yeah,
so,
first race of the season and using new technology. So it is a hybrid.
Yes.
Racing's gone hybrid.
Yeah, and this was the first year it was allowed. And I think this technology had existed for a while, but they haven't obviously implemented it into the sporting racing world, which I know Justin and I aren't, we don't keep up with that as much as we maybe should.
We're probably not race followers as much as we do enjoy watching a good race, but I don't know that we follow the sport probably a lot of people do.
And we should get Rick in here because Rick, one of our fellow associates here, he's the one that tells us all about it, right? He's the one that's always on top of it, making sure we're up to date on that. And to his point, there's a lot of good that comes out of this whole thing, out of the racing thing. There's a reason.
Well, especially this race. That's what I love about this race. Yeah. If there's anything in the racing world I like is the endurance factor of it. I mean, 24 hours of racing.
It's pretty grueling.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And then you talk about, the technology, the new technology that's involved. And it obviously some manufacturers, Porsche and it was Porsche and
Porsche Cadillac is a big contender.
Cadillac and BMW
was in there.
And I know that they had some struggles during the race, and that's Acura with their tried and true engineering kind of came through on that.
Yeah, it was super interesting because as you kind of read into it, and again, Rick did a really great job of letting us know what it was all about. So the interesting thing was Acura used, and again, sorry to anyone who's not like a race person out there, but the important part is that a lot of this parlays into our vehicles as far as the endurance, the longevity of our vehicles, things like that, some of the technology that goes on with that.
Acura is in it for the engineering side of it.
Correct.
Obviously there's some PR that goes along with being in the racing
and winning
and saying you won, which they do an awesome job with. But winning this race 3 years in a row really speaks to their engineering and how they try to translate that into the vehicles is really more importantly. And that's what I always thought about racing. That's probably why I never followed it as closely as I should. Because we had this conversation a little bit, is that very little translates to the car, to real people. In other words, the car, it's not the same car that you can go out and get in your garage and go to work in. I mean, it's not the same stuff. So that's hard for people to wrap their head around. I think racing would be more successful. No, I'm going to get I hear the booze coming. Racing would be more successful in the average consumer's mind if it was that car that was in their garage being raced
Yeah,
at some type of level.
Like literally that car behind me. And that's what's so interesting. And you know, we talked about that, how it doesn't, I guess it parlays to a certain extent, but maybe not to the extent that you want to. And I think it does, you have a disconnect between the consumer and racing. And I think that's a big part of it, is that they don't have that connection, that emotional connection to what, you know, they're driving, to what they're seeing racing.
I think that's the miss in the whole thing.
Right.
But to their credit, they're looking at future engineering and technologies that, you know, they're trying to improve or advance more so than here's what's on the road today.
Right,
you know,
right. And one of the really interesting things about this race was the Acura, the ARX that we use. Again, it's a hybrid. What I think every manufacturer used. I don't know if there was one. I don't know if I looked it up of any that were not using some type of hybrid technology. Yeah. Obviously, I'm sure that's how you keep up with the Joneses. Everyone's kind of developed that. But we were using a pretty small V6. I think it's with 2.4 liters, what I just read, which is crazy to have that, because the other manufacturers are using, you know, V8s or V12s in some cases that are. So it's kind of wild to have this car have such a small engine but still produce the power that it needs and the longevity. I mean, I kind of feel like the smaller the engine, the harder it technically might have to work. Right. You know, but who knows?
And you know, there's a gazillion things that go into that formula, especially a 24-hour race to get to not only have the car survive, but the best fuel economy and vice versa, and the power to weight ratio and everything that goes into it. Yeah. It's interesting though when everybody looks at the racing, they're allowed to use those different powertrains that differently and be that creative.
Right.
And I think you look at sports like, you know, maybe NASCAR, where they're pretty cookie cutter. Sure, can they change a couple things here and there, but you know, the cars essentially, other than the stickers, are all the same, and the powertrains are similar, other than they have a different brand on them, and you know.
Yeah, if they're even that car anymore, and that's like, you know, that's the disconnect. And the cool thing was that this car was, and which I guess I kind of assumed some of this, but once you read it, you're like, oh, I guess that does make sense. That engine was designed and engineered by the HPD, or Honda Performance Development Team, in Marysville, Ohio here. So again, really.
The race, the team that won is also from Ohio too.
Is the whole team from Ohio?
Yeah.
Or I got you. Yeah, the team.
Yeah, Shank Racing, Myers Shank is located here in Ohio, and that probably irritates some people out there in the world. Lonely little Ohio coming up with a winning racing formula.
Yeah, and I'm sure we didn't want to necessarily talk that long about the race itself, but I thought it was important to bring up.
But it's a good transition, because the pace car for the race was?
It was the Integra, the Teggy.
Not just any. The Type S.
The Type S.
Still in its camouflage.
Yes, still
They did not take that camouflage wrapper off. I think they really like that one, because they've...
Maybe that's going to be a color you can order when it comes out. Just the
I
camouflage.
had someone see the picture the other day, and they say, I really like that wrap on that car. And I'm like...
Oh, someone said that? It says Type S all over it.
I know. Okay. Well, I think that's what they thought was neat.
Yeah, they thought that part.
Maybe they should make that like a seat cover or something you can buy.
Well, maybe something like that. Some kind of, whatever. But yeah, so that is something that is obviously super cool. I wish they would just take the wrap off. Now that you said that, race, I'm like, it's a race that, you know, most obviously race fans are going to be watching it. I think sometimes you have those fringe fans or the people that are on the edge of racing. They'll probably tune in.
Wrap it differently or something. Maybe make it, you know, do something that different than what they kind of showed us the car they've already showed us. I mean, I don't know that.
Yeah.
And I didn't watch the race enough to see the car on the track, so I didn't get any more vibe. I think you could see a little bit more of the detail. I mean, like the fender flares that we weren't sure if it had. It looks like it definitely has them.
Right.
Now, that's under the wraps. It's concept still. We still don't know how the car's going to come out.
It's amazing how those wraps like hide the lines so well. Like obviously that's part of that. You're not getting like the same picture like when you have a one color vehicle. But anyway,
I will say one thing about the Type S Integra. Since everybody, that's the hot topic everybody always wants to know about. I will say that, you know, I heard some numbers of, you know, that it might be a little more limited than we think. Unfortunately,
okay. I did not know that.
I was thinking that, you know, we'd see a pretty decent volume of those. In other words, kind of like the TLX Type S or the MDX Type S. Yeah. But it sounds that, you know, they're getting a little pushback from the Honda side that because of how close it is to that car, that this might be more limited than we think.
That's news. I mean, I did not know that.
We'll see how that plays out. I don't know, but I was talking with one, our Acura rep, and they just didn't think that there would be that much availability of this car. And I'm like, really? I kind of was thinking the other way.
Boy,
so
that's a whole nother.
They don't have any insight on it any more than anybody, but they just thought it'd be a little more hard to get.
Well, obviously the TLX the Type S TLX has its own place. There's not a Honda competitor to that vehicle. So yeah, I mean, I guess that makes sense. I mean, I think, originally, and not to get off topic here, but the TLX Type S, I think they were originally, it said about 20% of what we were supposed to be selling, which is probably about right.
High expectations. Yeah. I mean, that's a chunk of cars for that performance segment. So anyways, NACTOY. So it also.
So moving on to that. So this was something that, I think originally, so again, the North American Car of the Year, obviously, as you probably know by now, the Acura INTEGRA was the winner of that. And I think at first when we saw that, I had a slight brush it under the rug type of mentality. Awards are great. It's nice to have that. But, you always hear these North American Cars of the Year, and then we never really expand upon that, right?
Well, I guess it just depends whether it's your car that's winning or not.
Well,
right? Might be a piece of it.
That's a piece of that.
There are a lot of awards out there. Yes. I think every automobile magazine does their own award, whether that be Car and Driver, Motor Trend. Yep. There's the Auto Show Awards. There's the North American Car of the Year Awards.
There's the one that they hand out to everyone, which is the JD Power Awards.
Participation Awards. I mean, JD Power Awards.
Yeah, right.
Yep. So like, there's so many awards. You kind of, which one do you hold at a higher esteem than others? I mean, I was a little bit of the what's that really mean type. You know?
That's how I felt too. I just didn't feel like, and like you said, I think it gets watered down when you have so many different awards. It's like, okay, which one holds more meaning? And I'm saying that like from a consumer standpoint, like, do I use that tool or that information to say, hey, I should, maybe look into this car because obviously it won some awards. But then, you have a lot of other cars, and we'll go through this list in a second here, but a lot of other cars that win awards like initial quality awards, and then they end up being not so great. So it's like, okay, like you said, which one should weigh heavier? And who knows? But, this one, and as we kind of dug into this, we found some interesting information, I thought. So.
Yeah, there were 47 cars and trucks. And so to be eligible for the award, it is a timely award. So your car has to be either brand new to the marketplace, like it never been made before, or a complete or major redesign of a current model. So it does limit the field pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Depending on the year, and I know we look back at some of the past winners, during COVID, there were very few cars. Matter of fact, the one category had very few cars in it, and you said, well, that's who won it. Well, they didn't have much to pick from.
Right, exactly.
So that does come up.
We're calling it timeout. Okay, moving on.
So that depending on how many are released in that time. Now, there were 47 last year.
Is that total between all cars, trucks, and SUVs?
Yeah, okay, total. So total across the board that qualified for this award. So they take 47 of those cars, they put them in the hands of automotive journalists, a select group of automotive journalists, and it sounds like there's a pretty big group. It's 50.
Well, it says 50, but then as we go, and I don't mean to jump ahead here, but it says total votes 174 for the INTEGRA. So what does that mean?
Wow, they each get 3 votes for each category. I mean, that is weird.
I don't know. I mean, this is, and again, this is funny. And the reason we wanted to, we started diving into this, and we realized there's more to like kind of look into here than just, hey, we won a cool award on North American Car.
It's 147 votes. How many?
I don't know. We can. Do you want to?
So what started some of this conversation when the award came out is I said, well, Integra is a great car. Don't beat me up over this. But is it worth the award? Did it really win the category of Car of the Year?
Yeah, of Car of the Year. That's a big category. Now again, I know it's only for cars that were new cars or redesigned cars, so it does limit that field pretty quick. But then to what merit does that award have for that car? Because we love the Integra, right? For a lot of reasons. Is it a better car or more of a car to win that award over the list here?
Right, so here's the list. Acura Integra, and these are alphabetical, so we're not any bias. BMW i4 eDrive 40i. Wow, talk about alphabet soup. They're getting a little crazy. BMW i4 M50i. Genesis G80, Genesis G90. Really weird that Genesis redesigned or had a major makeover of two different vehicles. I don't know much about that lineup.
I feel like those just came out.
Yeah. Maserati MC20, Mercedes C-Class, Mercedes EQE, Nissan Z, Porsche Cayman GT4 RS, Porsche 911 GTS, Subaru WRX, Toyota GR Corolla. So it's a list of 13 cars. That's a pretty good class of cars.
Right. I think that's what we saw, that we're like, there's Porsches on there. I mean, Mercedes, BMWs.
I know. Just at a glance, and I said to Matt, though, I said, well, the Nissan Z is a pretty iconic car, and I think they did a pretty good job with that. How does the Integra just walk away from that car being on the list? I'm not a Nissan Z fanatic by any means, but you're bringing back a car that has not been redesigned in years, has quite the legacy, and it is just
quite the legacy. Like car. Really a lot. Yeah, and go ahead.
Subaru WRX has always been a hot one in that category. I know there's been a lot of haters on that new one. I can see that. But also, I'll just point out another one on the list that kind of stands out is that Mercedes EQE. And not that I'm hugely in favor of any Mercedes product per se, and nothing wrong with them. They make a great car. Yeah. But that's kind of a new car in that category for that brand.
Yeah.
And I think that to me, it kind of means more in the marketplace maybe than that.
Yeah, and it pushes the boundaries on that newer technology. And it's kind of funny because that car, I don't know a lot about some of these other ones like the BMWs or even those Porsches necessarily, but like that car is kind of like where I imagine we should be right now in terms of, not Acura itself, but in terms of cars available out there. That Mercedes EQE is pretty advanced as far as that goes. And it's kind of like what you might expect a car to be now. Now, the Nissan Z is on the other spectrum. The Nissan Z reminds me of how the Integra is with regards to, you have people with the old stigma of like, hey, I want this old type of, sportier car. And like you said, the legacy with the Nissan Z is there. And not that I'm hey, I have to go, I'm not a Nissan fan at all, but obviously that car, it holds a lot of water, so.
Yeah, so I think we were kind of surprised on just how that, how they picked that car. Now, I think a lot of it has to do with when you bring back a nameplate that had such a storied history, and bring it back that it still holds a piece in everybody's heart. And interesting, I noticed looking back through some of the older winners, that the value was a big piece of this, which is surprising because I think a lot of these awards are just given to what they feel is the best, not the best overall because of all the different things it does, just because it's the best in that.
Yeah, and they don't really talk about like the requirements here. I think we tried looking through a lot of the stuff, even on the NACTOY or North America Car of the Year's website to see. Obviously we know what's eligible, to know that part, but like, what are they judging the vehicle on? And there's nothing that really talks about that, at least that we saw. So it's kind of like, okay, well, maybe it's a very much an overall award, and I think maybe it's a more important award. Now, as we go back through the years, we saw some cars were like, how'd that car win North American Car of the Year? There's a whole website that goes back, all the way back to when it first started, which I think it said like 1994 or something like that. So. But yeah, I mean, we love the Integra. We think it's a great car. I just wonder, obviously, and I highlighted this quote because it says this year is unprecedented variety of vehicle on sale today, which there is quite a variety of vehicle in terms of not only brand, but like what they each offer, including reborn models of iconic nameplates. So I thought that was interesting that they highlighted that, or at least I highlighted that.
Yeah, and that's kind of jumps out of the page on both those cars. The Integra and the Nissan Z. So interesting that they picked the Integra. But probably I think when you boil it down, it's the most. It's such a well-rounded car. Forget about the price point stuff, but it's more closer to reality for most people than some of maybe the other cars on the list. The average most of us as average consumers, there's some of these cars that we're just never going to own, right? And whereas the Integra, it could be in a lot of garages.
Yeah,
right?
oh, absolutely, And like you were talking about before, I know Justin has this grandiose idea about how things should look. But yeah, like, there's some price point between $20,000 and $100,000 that most of us are going to be buying those cars. Maybe even $80,000. I don't know, but that's how most of us are buying cars. We're looking at cars in that price point, and there's only, I don't know, a handful of those cars that are probably in that realm. Obviously, I think some of them are like on the higher tier of that, like the 60 to 80 realm. But like obviously the Integra is under 40, and I think the Nissan Z is over 40. Obviously the WRX is under 40 for the most part, and I don't know how much the GR Corolla is, but
I don't either.
And obviously that goes back to the whole value proposition of like what am I getting for the value of my car? Like what does that look like? And I think maybe that's where the Integra shined here. So they do drive the cars too. That's part of that.
They go through. They get time with each of the cars, and they get to put it through its paces, and so they go through a pretty extensive process. They narrow it down to 3 cars in each category, and then they go out and review each one of those cars to come up with an initial. The utility vehicle of the year, there were 31 vehicles, which was a pretty long list. Shockingly, how many of those are electric was incredible, and I know that will be moving forward. That's it says 19 electric vehicles. Yeah. That's the highest number ever, and truck of the year was electric, and so was utility of the year. So the F-150 Lightning in the truck category. Now, I didn't see the whole list of trucks that qualify, but it only shows 3.
I think it narrows it down. They have their list, and I think they narrow it down to like the top contenders, I think.
Well, that's how they do it in the categories, each category. But maybe there were only 3 trucks that were either all brand new or a bigger redesign. So.
And then utility of the vehicle of the year, which again, that list goes, it's pretty extensive. Again, there's a lot of cars you could pick from there and be like, that's a nice car. That's a great car. How did that not win? And we have the Kia EV6 that won that category. And again, that kind of makes me feel like there's a value proposition there.
I think you're right. As you look down through the list, Honda, really coming out strong with 3 new SUVs, CR-V, HR-V, and Pilot. So they all were thrown into this year. Now next year, those vehicles won't be on this playing field, right?
Right. Yep.
And so they all lost out to the Kia EV6.
Yep. Toyotas are on there, Subaru with their Solterra, lots of cars.
It seems like the value and maybe just the accessibility of your average person to some of those. Not that the Hondas are not good values or accessibility, but that Kia EV6, I think one of the big pieces of that car that's very attractive is that it's probably one of the lower priced, fairly good looking electric vehicle that's accessible. A Tesla is not accessible for everybody. You know, when you start
for an SUV, I know their car's like 40-something thousand, but again, it's such an interesting market right now, and I think obviously we weren't trying to hate on the Integra here. That's not a big piece of that, but something we do want to talk about in future episodes, that is something that we're going to start kind of doing is, giving, I know we're a dealership and I know, our opinion, it is biased to an extent, but I think something that you don't see out there and what we would like to try to do is kind of give our 2 cents on our vehicles, how they compare to other vehicles in the market, how, things that we think about them, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, whatever the case might be. I think our goal, because no car is perfect, and every car has its flaws, and every car has something that you said, I wish they would just do this, or I wish they would just do that. It doesn't matter what it is, you're going to be looking at that stuff as a consumer, and our goal is to do that. Make sure.
I think we can provide some value in customer feedback. Here's what customers are telling us about these cars, whether they bought them or didn't buy them. And I know we're going to jump into the MDX first, and that'll probably be the next episode you guys hear. And we're going to talk about the MDX and what customers have told us that have bought the car, and also the people that maybe said, no, this one's not for me, and this is why.
Right.
And hopefully that can help you, whether you have one or you're thinking about getting one down the road, that, just get this is your opinion. Because there's things about cars that mean different things to different people. We use the example of some features, and I have all kinds of features that you guys as consumers just absolutely love, and being in the industry, I hate, right?
That's absolutely right, yeah.
Right? So it's funny how that they just mean different things to different people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a perspective that we look to provide and Justin brought that up earlier as we were having a little discussion about like our podcast, is the fact that, hey, that's something that when you go and Google or YouTube reviews of vehicles, you're getting kind of a one-dimensional look at that car. It's basically that person's opinion of the car. Now, a lot of times, whether it be Alex on Autos, he does a great job because he just kind of talks about the car,
very neutral,
pretty dry, very neutral, which is fine. But there's not that outside or secondary perspective that I think that, like, and again, we're willing to provide, like, what are customers telling us? What do we see? Like, stuff that we see in the auto industry that, like you said, people think, I have to have that specific feature. And in reality, most people don't use it or they don't like it. So that's kind of what we want to do over the next couple. So stay tuned. We got some good stuff, coming up here. I'm super excited about that little, this little part of the project, because I think that's something that that's exciting for us, to talk about the vehicles in a way that is, I think, as transparent and honest as possible. So
sure, I think it'll be a new take on just trying to provide information, just trying to provide a little deeper maybe level of what we know and what we see and hear. And that's kind of really the whole idea behind the show is you get our perspective from the inside.
Yep.
And we're just trying to think of a good way to get it out to you.
Yeah, exactly. And we also don't want the next title to say Integra on it. So
yeah, sorry, Integi, but it's time to talk about the rest of the lineup.
It's time to move on. You won your award. Let's move on. Yeah. Actually, they won 2 awards. You won the engine award too. Remember that?
Yeah,
it just keeps going. It's great stuff here at Acura. So again, thank you everyone so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. Follow us on YouTube. We do have our podcast on Spotify too. So I know
it's on all the podcasts.
Yeah, Spotify, Apple,
Google.
What's the Amazon? Amazon. I'm not sure what the Amazon one's called. It's just Amazon? Maybe it's just
Amazon podcast?
And the only reason I bring that up is because I don't know if we could see how many listeners or viewers we have on those other ones, but we thank you so much for watching on YouTube. But those other resources are great as well if you're listening in the car, whatever it might be. So check it out there as well. Thank you again so much. We look forward to seeing you guys next time. Thank you so much and have a good night.
See you soon.